welcome once again to ALifeReal Stories from the Journey. This is Darren Humphreys in Christchurch, New Zealand, and with me is my co-host of ALifeReal, Paul Boone from the UK. We're excited after a number of weeks to be back in business. Living in, I think, as Paul had shared in a brief update, there'll be a number of weather conditions and family emergencies and a set of things that had meant that we hadn't been able to record an interview. But good morning to you, Paul.
Yes, good morning, Darren. Thanks very much. How are you keeping? You keeping well?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, thank you. And we're excited to have a guest with us today. In fact, two guests. A mother and daughter combo actually graduated with from the University of Phoenix in criminal justice, nonetheless. So she currently lives in Las Vegas, Nevada. Her son, Jonathan, who's aged 25, has Angelman syndrome. And so we're really happy to introduce to you today Karen de Fuente, and her daughter, Nakyta, who's joining her for moral support. And good afternoon to you both.
Hello. I'm not allowed to be in charge of the computer ever.
Oh, no, that's okay. Hi, Nakyta. Nice to meet you in person.
You too.
It's really great to have you with us. The time difference has allowed us to be able to have the conversation today. Grand.
Good to be here.
Yeah, Karen, as we do with all of our conversations, take us back and tell us a little bit about what life was like before Jonathan's diagnosis with Angelman syndrome.
Well, life was very different, of course. Actually, I was diagnosed as sterile, so we didn't expect to have any children at all. And then we got a surprise. I had the flu, and the doctor told me I had the 9-month flu, and of course, I knew he was wrong, so I corrected him several times, but actually I was expecting a baby. The pregnancy was horrible. I was quite sick, excuse me. So we ended up having a C-section early on so that, Jonathan could have a little better chance. So he was 3 weeks early. He was still huge. He was 8 pounds, 12 ounces. He was beautiful, adorable, this white shock of white hair, which the doctor was questioning that because, his dad is very dark and South American, and I had very dark hair like Nakyta, and then this child is born with these shocking blue eyes, really white skin, really snow white hair. It was very comical, actually, in the delivery room. And a little while later, because he was delivered by C-section, a little while later they brought him into me and laid him on my tummy, and I said, "Jonathan, hello." And he picked up his head, and he looked me in the eye, and he smiled at me. And at that moment, his dad started crying and said, "Something is terribly, terribly wrong. This is the best it's ever going to be." And he walked out of the room. And I thought, what the hell are you doing? Why would you be so negative? But he was right. So I'll have to give that one to him. Jonathan developed very slowly. The pediatricians thought we were just being really anxious first-time parents. So he was almost a year old before one doctor finally, he had had like 12 pediatricians by then. And one finally admitted, oh, he probably has cerebral palsy. And I wasn't satisfied, even though I was kind of glad someone at least said, okay, a child who's almost a year old who isn't sitting, eating, all he does that's right is smile and laugh, and even then he does it at the wrong time. So, so I called Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, which was about an hour and a half away, and I pretended that I worked for a doctor, and I referred Jonathan from, I think it was Dr. Springer, that was the name I chose, and referred him to the neurology department and set up an appointment. And went to the appointment, and the doctor, she was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, told me that he looked funny. And she didn't mean that in an insulting way. She was saying it looks genetic. We have to send him to genetics. Meanwhile, she ordered the MRI and things like that. At the end of the appointment, unfortunately, the time came to give her the doctor's address and phone number so she could send the report. And, well, I had to admit to her what happened. And I told her, you know, I hope it's not against the law to impersonate a doctor's secretary, but there is no Dr. Springer. And I thought he needed to come here. And she looked at me and she said, huh, are you from the Antelope Valley? And I was from the Palmdale area. And I said, yes. And she said, yeah, I can understand why you did that. But I still need to send a report to a doctor. So can I use your address? So we got mail for Dr. Springer at our house for quite a few months. And that's how we began our diagnosis routine. Fortunately, extremely fortunately, because this is 1991, January-ish 1991, very fortunately, the genetic doctor, she had just attended a conference where Angelman syndrome was brought up. And she hadn't met an Angelman syndrome child yet, but she noticed the back of his head was flat, he was laughing inappropriately, his movements were off the chart wrong, and she suspected that's what he had, and so she knew what to test for. We were very fortunate. He was diagnosed just before he was 1.5 years. We were very, very, very fortunate. Very.
What kind of impact did that have on the family when you received that notification back in 1991?
How did it affect us?
Yeah.
Well, let's remember I was pregnant with this one at the time, so I was a little bit emotional anyway. It just seemed like a long, long time. Excuse me. It just seemed like a long, long road ahead for this teeny tiny boy who did nothing wrong. It seemed like a life sentence to him, you know?
No, indeed. And how did your husband at the time take that news?
Well, I can't tell the real story because it's wrong. It's, you have to tell the real story. I'm going to tell it, but you're going to have to edit it out. We're the kind of people who usually react in a horribly inappropriate manner to things. And if you can remember that this is the early 90s, and he's from South America, and in the Hispanic culture, this would be a horrible thing. You kind of have to bear this in mind. We got the diagnosis, and he knew he was going to cry. So he grabbed his cigarettes and aimed for the door so that he could leave. And as he got to the door, his idea of the joke was, forgive me for saying this, he got to the door and he said, well, at least he's not gay. Which I could not believe he said, but you have to remember the culture, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Quite shortly thereafter, he did admit to me that, yeah, he wished Jonathan were gay rather than any of the diagnoses he got in the future, that's for sure. It was hard. It was just, I remember I asked the doctor, I said, he's so beautiful. When he gets older, is he going to be noticeably, visibly different? And she said, no, he'll continue to be beautiful. If a child sees him move or sees him try to laugh and talk, they'll realize he's not like them. But he's not going to be less than he is right now, which was kind of a comfort to me.
It really begins the learning experience and the growth really as a family, really, in terms of Angelman syndrome, and you know that the beginning of your journey. You know, so Wow, already. And, I think one of the things, would be is, just hearing your story there about your husband and his initial reaction, you don't have to apologise for him and for his beliefs and for his reaction to it. Many people react in different ways to the news. Some of them react positively and some people do react negatively, so you shouldn't ever need or feel the need to apologise for anybody's actions, including your own, for any of the feelings that you had, if you feel rightly or wrongly they were the way they were. They just were emotions, and sometimes we kind of keep them emotions suppressed and keep them down, and sometimes it just takes an event, a piece of trauma, a piece of news, and you can't contain that, that swelling, that emotion, those feelings and the way that you react. So no need to apologise for anything on the behalf of yourself or on behalf of your ex-husband or your husband as well.
So Karen, tell us, when you were told about Angelman syndrome, what was the information that you were given? Did the doctor give you some idea of what Angelman syndrome was, or did it send you to a computer, as it often does, even though there may not have been much information out there? Or was the doctor able to refer you to maybe the Angelman Syndrome Foundation or anything like that?
Yeah, there was certainly no home computer at the time. Excuse me, but I know it's good of me to drool. But she did have a pamphlet from Angelman syndrome that prepared. She got the diagnosis. The first genetic study we did, it didn't give any results, and so we did a second study, which had to be sent to Johns Hopkins, which is a hospital clear across the country. And she explained to me that they had to stretch the chromosome in order to find if there were any deletions, which they did. And then she took the time. She was lovely, Dr. Falk. And she took the time to give me all of the contact information she could find, which was Angelman Syndrome Foundation at the time. She explained to me that if doctors had ever heard of it, which she did not expect they had, it would be happy puppet syndrome. And not to be offended, that's just what it was being called. That's kind of all we got. She let me know that everything that was going on was normal for Angelman syndrome, the feeding problems, the digestive problems. She warned me he might one day have seizures. She did her best with the little tiny bit of information that she had at the time.
How was that for your extended family? Are you close in proximity to those people, or being able to get? Obviously, it's in all our experience, it's a pretty full-on time when our children are first diagnosed with something like Angelman syndrome. To be able to get some support around you, or some people that understood, or how was that for you?
Well, I had one sister who lived only an hour away for many, many years, and she's extremely close to Jonathan, my sister Marcia. Everybody else was pretty much scattered throughout the country, and although they were very supportive, over the phone, and they did their best, Jonathan glows. I don't know really how to, I don't have to explain it to you, you know what I mean. And so, of course, he won people over right and left just by being who he is. So it was easier, I think, for them to become attached. And it helped that he was still a tiny, beautiful little baby. My mother lived with us at the time, and until she died later. And she was obviously extremely supportive and extremely helpful. And interestingly, my mother was very much a shrinking violet, but when it came to Jonathan, she really grew a pair. She became quite the defender of this little man, and he definitely showed a side of her she didn't even know. Yeah.
And this is all probably, I'm imagining in the timeline of things that Nakyta's about to be born as well. So I guess having your mum living with you, and the challenges that it has having another small child and Jonathan, and those sorts of things. Tell us something about were you able to access and get some help with Jonathan in terms of his development, physical therapy, or those sorts of things?
Yes, we had a lot of help once we found Regional Center, which is a thing here in America. It's a government sort of body that helps connect you to services, to other services, as well as when they're little, their therapists to the home. And so, yeah, we were introduced to Regional Center, and they informed us of a program in the next town called Baby Steps. And we received OT and PT there for Jonathan. And once every couple of weeks, they would have a psychologist come in to give the parents, 20 minutes with a psychologist. We kind of needed help too. So yeah, services started early on compared to other kids with Angelman syndrome who were born approximately the same time he was, I think.
Did things change for Luis in terms of his perspective with Jonathan as he grew? And
Luis was inseparable from Jonathan from birth, and although we had that little hiccup at diagnosis, because he had, as you know and as Paul understands, he had his image in his head of teaching his son to play soccer and seeing De La Fuente across Jersey, and it was obviously an adjustment we went through over and over and over and over and over again, but that didn't dim the fact that this was his son, destined to be his only son, at least that we know of. Yeah, Luis adores both of his children tremendously, and still, even though he doesn't live here now, Jonathan's untouchable, Nakyta's untouchable. Don't touch his kids. His kids are beautiful just the way they are, no matter what. And that helped with me as a mom, never, ever, ever sleeping for the first 8 months, ever, longer than 15 minutes. It was good to know that despite Luis's initial reaction, he was completely devoted to Jonathan, and he was in it for the long haul.
How was that whole process in terms of thinking about Angelman syndrome and things for yourself, Karen? Because I think often for all of us, there's that period of time where we need to have a change, a paradigm shift, or a change in terms of what or how we see our children. And maybe at this point in time we can allude to the piece that we were talking about earlier, which is really about perspective and about purpose and seeing those things.
Well, obviously, as everyone in our community knows, the first thing you do is mourn the child that you thought you had. Even though you're extremely grateful for the child you have, you still mourn the child you thought you had. You have to bury that one in kind of a way. And to be quite honest, at first, Jonathan had so many diverse special care needs. I really didn't have time in the beginning to really process much of anything. It was feed him 1.5 ounces every hour and a half. You know what I'm talking about. The physical, emotional labor doesn't really allow you the luxury of, well, let's go in the backyard and cry for 1.5 hours. We don't have that kind of time. So actually, I think for me, the morning began a little bit later. But what you going to do? You've got to go to work. You've got to take care of your children. You have things to do.
How would that compare if we were to think about how you see Jonathan and Angelman syndrome and that as part of your life now, looking back? Would you say that there's I mean, how do you see Angelman syndrome in relation to Jonathan?
Well, I have a completely different perspective now. I've been very blessed that no matter how many times we've almost lost him, we haven't. And I've had him long enough to go through many paradigm shifts. How I see him now is an absolute blessing to us. I know that may sound a little odd to people who don't know this lifestyle. Is that what we would call it? Yeah. Because it's labor intensive. But he's shown me, he's taught me, he doesn't speak, he doesn't even communicate. I know a lot of Angelman syndrome children communicate in their way very well. Jonathan has had many setbacks that took away, Jonathan has had many setbacks along the way that took away skills that he had and that he relearned, and then they were taken away again, and then he relearned. So I do understand the parents whose kids do better. I guess I'll use that. He doesn't have that, and yet, you know, he finds his own way to get his needs met. Nevertheless, if I can say on a spiritual or psychic level, he has taught me so much about what's really important and about who we really are. Not human beings, spiritual beings. I don't know if I could have come to who I am inside without him in my life. I don't know.
I think what I'm hearing you say in terms of Jonathan is, and I think Paul would attest to this with Sebastian, is the just utter perseverance of our sons. You know, those things where we seem to have been something in a setback, and a perseverance on and on again. And I think from talking to Paul and sharing our experience, we would agree with you that, and probably many parents would too, just that our lives would never be the way we are, and we would have never met the people that we've met, or done even some of the craziest things that we might have done.
For me, Darren, you know, just to play to your points there, and you know, it's like the touching of souls. You know, I think this community is for everybody, Darren. You know, in terms of my journey meeting you, in terms of everybody that I've interviewed as part of this project that we're doing here, it's about touching souls. The souls of the people who are the carers, the parents, the siblings, the professionals, and then also the individuals themselves. Doesn't matter which Angelman's child that you meet, doesn't matter where you meet them. You can spot them in a supermarket, you've never met them before, but you know from 250 yards away that child has Angelman's, and that you know if you go within arm shot of that child, you're going to get your hair pulled, your eyes gouged, and you're going to have the most wonderful cuddle in your life. And for me, Darren, you know, you know, just playing to Karen's point as well, it is for me the touching of souls, and I find this journey that I'm on as part of being an Angelman's parent a very emotional journey. I've come into touch with emotions that I never even knew that I had, and if it hadn't have been for the fact of my wife and for my children and for Sebastian and the journey that he's given me, I probably would never have realised that I had them. I probably wouldn't be quite as open about my own life and about who I am and my own journey if it wasn't for the fact of him coming into my life and allowing me to express myself, my feelings and my emotions. And you know, Darren's played a huge part in my journey, as I know I've shared before, but again, the touching of souls between Darren and myself, and us both wanting to do this, is about that need as well. Once you have it, it becomes like a drug. You want more of it because you don't ever want to be in a situation where you never want to have that in your life. And to not have that in your life, for me, would make me a very, very poor man. You know, and I'm grateful and I'm blessed for everything that I've had as part of my own journey. And, you know, that includes Darren, yourself, Rita, all of our guests on the show, and everybody I've ever met at any conference or in the street as well.
maybe you can ask you Nakyta at this point in time about tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up with Jonathan as your brother, and as you come to understand that Jonathan might have been different to a sibling that some of your friends might have had.
It's really funny because my best friends growing up, one had 2 brothers and one had 4 siblings. And I never noticed that he was different. He was my brother, and that's how he was. And it was my job to protect him. And that's just how he was. He was Jonathan, and maybe he did some things differently. But in my eyes, he was the same as everyone else.
How has that been as you've gotten older and understood and come to understand maybe Angelman syndrome a little bit more?
When I was little and I started understanding what it was, what his differences were, it just made me more protective of him. And I'm still known to black out if someone says something, which I'm not proud of, but it does happen. When I was 2, I told a kid said ew when he looked at Jonathan in the grocery store. And I picked up a jar of pickles and I said, I will make you drool in a wheelchair the rest of your life.
She said that.
And I charged after him. And I've always had that fire in me with him. And as I grew older and I saw that he wasn't as advanced as some other kids with Angelman syndrome, it was hard to deal with. It's still hard to deal with. But on one hand, I'm so happy he can't walk because I can't imagine the trouble that he would get into because he already gets into so much trouble. And we still work with him on things. We still try to get him to do things that other Angelman kids can do with no problem. But to me, he's just Jonathan. He's my brother. I will always protect him. I will put someone in a wheelchair for him any day. That's what I do, and he's my boy. I've always called him my boy. He's the love of my life.
When we were interviewing one of our previous guests on ALifeReal, Rita, we were talking about the roles that her sons played in the raising of her son, Scotty. And what Rita was saying is that one had gone for a very motherly approach, and one had gone to the protector role. So do you see yourself, Nakyta, in the protector role?
Both. So both. He's my boy. I fight her over what we do with him and decisions about him every day. We always argue. It's like I'm his second mother. I'm not his little sister. I'm his protector. He's my boy. I have always called him my boy. There's pictures when we're 2 and 4, and I'm feeding him, I'm sitting him up, I'm holding him. It's just been my life, and it's what I've done my whole life. I've always just tried to be right there to sit by him and stand by him and hold his hand through everything that we've all had to go through together.
But you're tougher on him than I am.
I'm so much tougher on him. Because you'll tell him no, and he'll go, heh, and do it anyway. So you know with that noise that he knows.
So here's a question and a point then for the both of you, because I think we touch upon some important points here now, is that, and so certainly some points that we've never really discussed with maturer angels and maturer siblings, is that, and this is for the pair of you, to discuss and be as open as you like, is that Karen, I'm pretty sure, before Nakyta was born, there was no expectation of the fact that when a sibling was born, that their responsibility or part of their responsibilities would be in terms of the helping, of the raising, of the doing, almost being a junior carer. Forgive the expression, it may be an inappropriate term. But Nakyta, as well for you, do you see that as part of your role? Did you feel there was no expectations on yourself? How is that relationship between yourself as part of carer, I suppose, is where I'm going.
You want me to go first?
You go first.
I'll go first. Here's the deal. Of course, we didn't expect to have any children, and suddenly have 2 children. But our whole plan, I swear, was that Nakyta would have as normal a life as possible. No responsibilities added on because of Jonathan. Go ahead and be as average as you want to be. And she threw it all in the toilet by the time she was 1.5 years old. She wanted to feed him. She wanted to be the vigilant one. She could barely speak, and she spoke very, very young. And she came running in and told me he had T-shirts in his eyes because he was having a seizure. She came running in, Mommy, 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 Gigi have a T-shirt in the eyes. And it was like, this is not your job. Your job is to be a toddler. Well, go tell her, because there was no choice.
They tried. They tried. They ate for effort, but it wasn't going to work. He was mine. I always claimed him as mine. I remember being 4 or 5 years old and throwing a fit, screaming because I couldn't put his medicine in his food. And I wanted to, because that was my job for the day. I never was given any extra obligations with him, but I took them on. Whether it was feeding him, changing his diaper, anything like that, it just came natural. It was something I was supposed to do, and I did it. And no one told me to. No one said I should help.
Not to.
Yeah. No one said I should help more.
No.
I remember when I was about 12, one of my aunts had said, you could just lie and say you fed him. And that had never occurred to me. That was the most mind-blowing thing any human could have possibly said to me. She was like, you're young. You could just say that you did and go do what you... No, that's not how it works. And that's just how it's always been. He's mine. I take care of him. She gave birth, but he's mine. I never was told I needed to do things. I just did them, and I fought to do them.
It's true.
I think it's testament to you both that you're obviously very, very strong together, and you're a great team together. One of the consistent traits, I suppose, of siblings is a distance. Really, they tend to distance themselves from the parents, maybe not wanting to apply more pressure to the parents because they're already dealing with enough, and maybe don't share some of their own angst and some of their own problems. Was there any evidence of that within your own relationships at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think Nakyta protected us a lot from her own emotions, even from a young age. My mom, as you heard earlier, lived with us. Well, she got liver cancer when Nakyta was 6, and he was still 5. And she decided she wanted to be home for her care, so we did hospice care at home. She was expected to remain with us 2 months, but was with us for 10. And Nakyta went through everything we went through, of course. That's her second mom, not her grandma, her mom. I walked in one day, this first grader is in there trying to change out my mom's catheter bag. I went nuts, stop. And then when my mom did finally cross over, Nakyta, of course, cried and did what people do. We all did. But after that, I think she tended to confide in her friends, go to her friends. I got her therapy at school. She didn't want to open up to the therapist at school. She protected us from her grief, knowing we'd been through enough. And we, of course, wanted her to open up, but she wasn't about to. Was not about to. Because, again, she didn't want to burden us. You used the right term.
Oh, and is there anything you'd like to admit to now, Nakyta, while you're on camera and we're recording?
It's pretty much all true. They had enough on their plate. I didn't want to add more to it. And even to this day, like when Jonathan's in the hospital, I shut down, I go into logic mode, and I break down and freak out when he's home.
Yeah.
I just turn it off emotions. which is helpful. Instead of panicking and screaming at the hospital, we know what medicines he needs. We know what tests he needs. And I've just always been like that.
We might have influenced that because we tend to go on autopilot too during hospital stays.
Referred to a number of hospital visits or close calls with death, maybe for Jonathan. I'm guessing that perhaps seizures have played a role in that. That is being an ongoing challenge for Jonathan and for the family in terms of a seizure condition.
Absolutely, yes. Seizures, mostly with him when he was little, it was pneumonia and seizures. As an adult, it's been mostly seizures. You of all human beings know the seizure trail, and the times that there's times they can bring him back pretty quickly, and there's been times when it's been coma for days, and you just roll with it. But so I have to be very clear when I speak to people. Excuse me. I always try to be very clear with people when I can see they're mentally drawing comparisons, say between Jonathan and another angel they know. And I try to be very direct and explain to them, Angelman syndrome didn't do this to him, the seizures did. The damage that was done, the things that were lost, this was epilepsy, not Angelman syndrome. And our Angelman syndrome makes them have the propensity to seizures. But the damage was done by epilepsy, not by Angelman syndrome.
Can I take you back and say what was your experience when you first met some other families or parents of children with Angelman syndrome?
Well, before we moved to Las Vegas 10 years ago, we'd only met one other child with Angelman syndrome, and he was enormous. This kid was in high school. He was 6'2". He was enormous. He was adorable and lovable, extremely destructive by virtue of his size and strength. His family was sweet, very adorable, but he was literally our only other Angelman syndrome person until we moved here. And when we got here to Las Vegas, we went to the Angelman Syndrome Foundation walk and found out there were several families here, which was really nice and gratifying. But it turns out, I'm the grandma of the group, and Jonathan's the old man of the group because everyone else is quite young.
How was that experience for you?
I have to say,
meeting those people or meeting those other children whose lives were impacted by Angelman syndrome.
I have to say, for the most part, I was just thrilled to meet other families who knew my language, so to speak.
Let me say it. Yeah. On the other hand, it was bittersweet to see where Johnny could have been without the damage the seizures had caused. To see him walking. One of the kids we know rides a bicycle now. And it's harder to see. We're so proud of them and we're so happy for them. But there's still that little twinge in our heart to know where Johnny could have been. Yeah.
We try very, very hard to always be as upbeat as we can and as positive as we can when talking to other parents because, A, their kids are achieving more and they have so much more available through technology, through doctors who freaking understand what AS is. These advantages, they need to take advantage of them. So we always try to be encouraging. And, and then again, if they want to swear and throw things and put a hole in the wall, we're there. We get it. It works for us.
Tell us about what was your obviously I think for when Paul and I first met, it was Facebook didn't exist, but I know that you're reasonably active on Facebook and you've got some friends all over the place. Karen, what How's it been for you in terms of the wider communication with parents, or have you been in contact with other folks whose children are Jonathan's age and experiencing some of the challenges that you do at his age?
I can't remember how I got through life before Facebook, to be quite honest. It's been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tool. I have met literally hundreds of other parents through Facebook, gotten very close with several of them, some even with kids older than Jonathan, and of all the spectrum of abilities. So I know parents with children who are very similar to Jonathan, and children who are like Billy, you know, who just do everything. And each one of these families enriches my life so much. I don't have words for it, but it's as if, I don't know, it's as if we had this tiny little electronic country that we live in, and we don't make it insular, but we speak the same language no matter what level we live on. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Wonderful thing.
It is. It's, you don't really want to go. You don't really want to call it a planet so as to define your child simply as Angelman syndrome, but recognizing that your child's life is impacted by Angelman syndrome. But you're right in terms of the number of people just right across the face of the planet that I think we wouldn't have ever had an opportunity. I think the conversation we're having today is testament to that. So tell us about the contact that you've had with Don. Don came to visit recently and had some medals to present to Jonathan.
That is so incredible. There's a group on Facebook I run for, and it's a bunch of runners of all ages, and they kind of adopt a kid who can't run for himself or herself, and share whatever part of their experience they can with them. They'll send the medals or the T-shirts. Jonathan does his, on the phone, I have an app he can draw on. On the phone, there's an app he can draw on with his thumb, and we send Don pictures that Jonathan makes for him. And Don signed up. He's from way up in Minnesota, and he signed up for a race here in Las Vegas months ago, and he wanted to meet Jonathan. Literally, that's why he came. And he and two friends came, and they ran in the race, and we got to meet up. And it was a wonderful, special experience to get to know in person someone who's willing to, you know, he can have a normal life and do his thing and not care. And he does care. And he came and he wanted to he told me so many times, I want to put the medal around his neck myself. And to have a picture of that, and to have that moment, and to have him meet Jonathan, and not give a damn whether Jonathan could talk, whether he would look at him when he talked. He didn't care. He knew Jonathan was doing Jonathan's thing, and he accepted that. And I don't know what difference Jonathan has made in Don's life, but Don in our lives, a stranger coming in and making sacrifices in order to meet Jonathan, treating Jonathan like a guy. It's been a wonderful experience for us. And I hope for him. I hope for him.
I did a few events with Sebastian over the last while, and for me it was kind of the readjustment of the milestones in terms of not being able to do soccer, or hockey was my thing. You know, so for me being able to do some stuff with Sebastian was kind of like a realignment of some of them personal goals that I'd had as a dad with Sebastian. And it was cycling quite big distances, 60 miles or so, and I love it. But as well as the fact of being able to do it with Sebastian as well, chatting away to him like, you know, it is for him. This is his event. This is, you know, and I've been the same, you know, in relation to Don, wanting to put the medal around his neck, you know, because this is important memory making for Sebastian. This is an experience for Sebastian. This is what, you know. if I love to do it and I'm enjoying it, I know that everybody else is enjoying it. I certainly know Sebastian's going to enjoy it. And he feeds off the crowd, he feeds off the energy, you know, so I can completely plug into what Don's, what Don's thinking and what he's doing there as well. I think that's really, really great. Two key question areas I want to discuss around. The first one would be coming into puberty and maturity. Older angels, as you know, we've got a lot of parents on the journey who, I know it's probably one of them subjects, isn't it? But you know, we've got a lot of parents who haven't been through that journey, don't really know what to expect or how to handle and how to manage it. What would your advice be to parents, and what were your experiences, you know, as Jonathan was going through puberty?
They're going to touch themselves a lot. They're going to touch themselves
a lot. And try as you may, they're going to touch themselves a lot. And they're going to have mood swings, just like anybody else. Obviously, with Jonathan, we have it made because, you know, he's not walking all over the house doing this stuff. But even at almost 26, once in a while he remembers, you know, Mr. Happy exists, and Mr. Happy wants attention, and Mr. Happy gets sometimes too much attention, and gets irritated. You know, it's just you really have to distract him when he's in that mode, which fortunately isn't all the time. There's other issues that every other teenager has. Your body odor changes. Your hair gets greasier faster. You get angry. Jonathan doesn't actually get angry, but he can get stubborn. Puberty is not funny for average kids. And then if we add to it the inability or the inhibited ability to communicate, it's really hard on them. So it's a little hard on us because we're constantly thinking, how can I adapt this to a point where they understand, you know, where my child can understand this will pass. Honestly, one day you'll feel normal again. And it's definitely a roller coaster. Puberty is not fun for anybody, ever. Just ever. Much less for someone who can't, you know, scream and shout and get it off their chest. But you have to deal with it the best you can. I'll be honest with you. I'll just say it right out loud. I'm glad he's not a girl. That would have brought so much more with it. Not just the monthly physical thing, which wouldn't have been pretty. I mean, he's in a diaper, so I guess it wouldn't have changed much to be a girl. But the whole, I'm a girl and I know. We react constantly every month for the rest of our lives until we hit 50. So I have to be honest and say, you know, thank God he's a boy. That's an advantage when he's not, you know, so busy with Mr. Happy a lot.
It's certainly one of them areas where there isn't a lot of information out there. There's not a lot of support available for people to, you know, to talk. And I suppose even people don't really want to talk about it. You know, it is a personal experience and it is a, you know, a private experience. But I think it's one of them conversations, you know, that we see a lot in terms of, you know, on the application, you know, application forms, but information requests in terms of what, if you wanted to know more, what would you want to know more about? I think, you know, getting older, going through those teenage years, and, you know, masturbation and whatever all becomes part of that topic, you know, because it is something we all go through and we all found challenging, and then we have to try and represent somebody else who, like you say, you know, quite articulately, they can't articulate themselves what they're going through. They can't articulate the pain. They can't articulate the pleasure. So I think it's one of them areas that maybe we as an Angelman's community could probably lead the way and start having that discussion as well as part of a wider network. My second question is more of a difficult question because it kind of shines a spotlight on our own mortality, really. Is it, you know, what are the plans, you know, for Jonathan as he grows older and as we as individuals ourselves grow old? You know, what's the plan? Is he going to go with Nakyta? Is he going to go with a home? You know, Nakyta, are you going to get married and have him live with you guys? Or, you know, I mean, I don't know what's the thinking there, or...
Here's the deal. The original plan was, when we get to a point where I can't take care of him, he'll be provided for, and I'll find a good setup for him, and Nakyta will have a normal life and live with her husband and raise her own family and not have to worry about this stuff. I'll give it to her now.
I vetoed that very quickly. I am engaged. We will be married in, oh God, less than 4 months. I didn't realize that until right now. My fiance does live with us, so we all four kind of help out, take care of each other, because she has her health problems too. So when I have to call 911 and she's in the hospital, me and him rearrange our work schedules so that him and I can take care of Johnny, someone can see her, we can take care of the house. And she always tells us we need to move out and make our own life and have our own place. And I tell her she's dreaming and it's not going to happen. And I think it's just another part of that I've taken on the obligation. And no one asked me to, and I don't see it as an obligation. But these are my people, and I will take care of my family. And she fights it. We fight about this at least once a week for the last probably 8 years. And we just take care of each other. I take care of her. She takes care of him. We take care of him. She takes care of us. And it's just a really dysfunctional circle.
I think, just to kind of just bring some, from my own point of view, clarity is that my own mortality is one of them things that I struggle with a lot, and especially when it comes to me trying to focus in more on Sebastian than I do with Harrison. Harrison is regular, shall we say. And I've got no challenges really in terms of that, but like yourself, Karen, there's no expectation on Harrison in terms of him stepping up to the plate and saying, I'll take my brother, he can come and live with me and my wife or my husband or whatever. And I personally, my challenge, and the point I'm asking you this question is, it's a really good conversation to be having, but it is also a very difficult question to be asking as well, because we know sometimes we might not want to know the answer. And I take you as a very spiritual person, Karen, and I know you'll always be by his side no matter what anyway, looking down and making sure, the best always happens for him. And, but I don't know, it's just one of them questions I do ask, and I like to ask because I'm just maybe framing it for myself as well as, what happens when I go, who's going to look after Sebastian? Who's going to speak up for him? Who's going to take care of all of his best wants and needs? And who's going to take care of mine even though I'm not here anymore? Yeah, that's just me. There you go. You see, that was just me there, having a little moment. Darren, rescue us.
So does Jonathan like to wear a beard, or does he like to be clean-shaven?
Jonathan really doesn't like me messing with his facial hair. I wouldn't attempt a real razor anywhere near that boy, but I do take an electric, the hair trimmer. I put it on the lowest thing and I'll trim him. And he's used to me doing his hair. He really doesn't like me messing with that beard. He likes his beard just fine. He loves it. Oh. But eventually the baby food and stuff gets stuck in it, so I do trim it down.
Yeah. What? Tell us about some of Jonathan's favourite things to do.
Well, let's see. He loves to, everything. Yeah. He loves to shred books, paper. He loves to shred paper. He likes to put everything in his mouth except food. You will never see him put food in his mouth, but he'll put
plastic
paper, a fire log, anything that isn't food, he'll put in his mouth. But you give him food that he knows is food, he will not put it in his mouth. So go figure that. He loves to watch cartoons. He loves to watch movies. He loves music more than anything, I think. He loves music. If you sing with him, he looks at you like you are so bad, but he still enjoys it. He likes to watch videos. He loves bubble wrap and bubbles. And of course, it goes without saying that he loves water, 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 water. water.
Talking about water, apart from being in a bath or being in a shower, how did he get on? Do you have an opportunity to take him out to a pool?
Well, we had a pool in our backyard until this summer, and
Okay.
yeah, we went in the pool all the time until then. He loves the pool.
Yeah, I think because there's a whole bunch of freedom, I think, in terms of being able to be in water that makes the difference. It just actually really makes the difference in terms of the whole body weight. And that was something for Elijah, that he was, even though he was small, he was able to, with something flotation, there was the ability to be able to just maneuver and be about, albeit a bit more independently, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it helps because the water has that little bit of drag on it, and so where Jonathan tends to be spastic, in the water it kind of slows him down, and it's wonderfully therapeutic. And I do agree with you, there's no gravity to fight with, and then there's that slight drag that gives him a little more control, which I think it probably feels very, very good for a change.
Sure. Paul referred to spiritual changes. Have there been occasions with Jonathan, just wondering, where you've noticed spiritual connections with him and yourself, or with him and other people, or?
Jonathan with other people, if Jonathan doesn't like somebody, I don't. You know what I mean? Jonathan will look, when he looks at someone, he looks way deeper than I can ever see. And he knows immediately, he connects. I don't know another word to use for it. He connects. There's 3 or 4 people in his life that he would have nothing to do with. Whatever turned him off, turned me off too then. I trust him 1,000%. His instincts are right on. Jonathan, and this is a little, I don't know how many people will believe this, but I bet a bunch of Angelman parents will believe it. Jonathan, from the time he was tiny, would smile and laugh and giggle and interact with someone I couldn't see. Now, was that his grandpa? Possibly. I don't know who it was, but it wasn't imaginary. There's definitely someone there. He reacted sometimes as if tickled. You know how they'll do that when you tickle them. His reactions were very natural, but I couldn't see the person. So Jonathan, in my opinion, and I know this might be a little bit out there, in my opinion, Jonathan has 1 foot in our world and 1 foot in the spirit world. And he communicates with both in his own way. And I think he's got a leg up on us because of that. I think it's an advantage. He keeps that perspective that I can't keep because I don't live in the spirit realm. And it shows. The connections, instant connections he makes with people, that's not something earthly. I can't believe that for a moment. That's definitely something spiritual. It's like, hey, I remember you. And they respond. You can see it in their eyes. I love you. And they don't know why. They don't know why they love him and they know him, but they do. That's not something of this world. It can't be.
I believe you. Often for our children, in those even in the early years, their interaction in let's call it in a realm that's actually really different. And I think that my experience as a human being, that Elijah has taught me so many things. Just to slow down, or has taught me unconditional love in a way, or communicates those in a way that are just beyond words.
I know they speak a lot about other planes and it being energy based and being able to transmit energy and receive energy, and I think that's what our angels are very specifically good at, is in terms of that loving energy. When they throw their arms around you, That's exactly what it is to me. It's that transfer of energy, or the eyes catch you across the room. You know, it just goes back to my earlier point, you know, and I think that is, you know, and I would agree with both Darren and yourself as well. I think there's something more to it. You know, there's an energy about them, and you can't. I think most, as you say, most Angelman's parents would probably struggle in terms of trying to argue against that. There's just something about them.
There is. It's one of those privileges and advantages to having an Angelman child.
So when you said Jonathan doesn't like any food, is there anything he does like bananas or kiwi fruit or ice cream or?
Oh,
he's not.
Jonathan doesn't like anything cold ever.
Really?
So everything has to be room temperature or body temperature. He only eats pureed foods. Unfortunately, he is allergic to a lot of what we would consider mainstays: egg white, soy, flour, wheat, oats, all the good stuff. He doesn't seem to like meat very much or digest it very well, so his meat is very minimal, if at all. The one time it's really funny, Jonathan, again, hates cold food with a passion, but 2 hospital stays ago, when another time that we thought maybe he would be leaving, when he came back to us, they sent up vanilla ice cream in a little cup on his tray, and we were like, he won't. Oh, yes, he did eat it. Oh, yes, I don't know why. I don't know what happened, but for the first and only time in his life, he wanted that vanilla ice cream. And I think, maybe it was just, if I'm going to be in a coma, maybe while I'm awake I should try this stuff just once. And he loved it. He just loved it. Remember that?
What are some things that you use in terms of his diet that are pureed food and things that you found are particularly helpful? I'm guessing he probably did he experience some of the same issues, digestion and constipation, and so are those issues for him?
Constipation is horrible. It can make him sick. It can make him have seizures. I hate it. So we avoid constipation at all costs, which only took about 15 years for me to figure out. In the beginning, it was fairly easy because he could eat oats, and oatmeal kind of kept things going. And then, no, can't have that. And then it was trial and error with many fibrous foods. The magic for Jonathan is a sweet potato every day, really. Just smash that up with some butter and brown sugar and cinnamon, which he considers a delicacy. It's kind of like a 7-course meal to him. He loves it. Thank goodness he loves it, because it's every day. And we just have to keep the fiber in. It's really funny. He's always liked orange vegetables, carrots, yams, you name it, squash. And it's really kind of funny because when he was about 3, we thought he had jaundice. He was horrifically yellowish orange, horrifically. And we didn't know what the hell was going on. We took him into his pediatrician, who said, oh, he has carotenemia, but he said carotenemia, which I thought was carrot anemia. And I said, carrots bring anemia? And he said, no. The beta-carotene has become part of his skin. And you're going to have to give him a little less of those orange foods because he's turning orange. So unfortunately, we had to cut down those favorite foods for a while. But it's constipation is something we avoid at all costs. Lots of liquids. Got to have that yam every day, along with whatever cereal product we can eat, which, rice. That rice doesn't help. Rice is constipating. So we always have to balance it out with prunes or something else.
What sort of medications does Jonathan have in terms of looking to have some good seizure control or dealing with the epilepsy?
We're really lucky right now. He's only taking 2 daily medications right now. He's taking Keppra, or the generic for Keppra, twice a day. And believe it or not, from dinosaur times, he's on phenobarbital, which I know most parents don't want to use, and I understand because it's a caveman drug, but it works for him. So he has his Keppra and his phenobarbital twice a day, and should he get a little funky looking, we have Ativan, so that we can hopefully prevent him from getting to a point where he needs to go to the hospital.
Sure. What's that like in terms of patterns of things in particular for him with the epilepsy? Are we talking that you apart from that medication, that how often would you normally experience some sort of occurrence during the week or during the month, or?
Sure, absolutely. Right now we're very lucky because we have very good control right now. He hasn't had a grand mal since, what, his birthday? His birthday last year. By the way, we don't sing happy birthday to him anymore. Yeah, he's 2 years old. We don't sing happy birthday to him anymore because we were singing and he went back and had him a grand mal, and we were like, okay, we won't sing that anymore. Drops and leafy things and, you know, simple complex partials. Sure, occasionally. We're very lucky right now because they've gone through 80 meds, but finally found the combination that kept him pretty under control right now. And we'll take it because there's been times when he's had 600 drop seizures a day, and it's wonderful to not be experiencing that right now. It's wonderful.
So for me, that's quite terrifying to think, you know, just the numbers of seizures in a day, you know, potentially 600 is absolutely huge. You know, we've been very, very lucky in terms of Sebastian's journey. You know, he's way, way low down in terms of seizure activity. Goodness me. I don't even know how, you know, it's one of them things that kind of irks me, and it doesn't when people say I don't know how you cope, because I'm like, well, we do. We just have to get on with things. But, you know, I have to say that to you. It's like, goodness me, I don't even know how you would cope, you know, 600 seizures. Crazy. Right, I'm going to ask you both 3 questions now. The question, firstly, to Nakyta is, as a sibling, speaking to other siblings who are earlier in the journey than yourself, or however, what would your 3 pieces of advice to other siblings be?
That it is okay to live your own life if you choose to, but it is okay to fight to stay and take care of your sibling, because they are the most important thing. He is the most important person for me. When my fiance moved in, I told him there was nothing questionable that would ever go on because he would be out of the house. Because Jonathan is my priority. It's not worth going to jail if you want to hit the kid with the jar of pickles. That was a hard one to learn, because I really wanted to do that several times. God, what am I? Oh, I know that.
These kids don't, if they're 10 or 11.
If you have a loved one who is handicapped in any way, you know the difference when someone's looking at them or staring at them in a sweet way or in a more derogatory way. And you have every right to stand up for your sibling and your family. And you don't have to apologize. Don't make excuses. Just say exactly who you are inside the house, outside the house. Because that person is going to be your priority for the rest of your life, no matter what. No. Yeah. No. Yes. No. You can answer that on yours.
And she wants to recommend, you're leaving? And she wants to recommend that young people make sure they have their own hobbies, their own things, and don't sacrifice.
That is not what I said.
Themselves for the well-being of their siblings.
I think balance is absolutely right, Karen. I think, you know, people should be allowed to make that decision for themselves, and I think that's probably Nakyta's point, is she's making that decision for herself. And I've seen it, where people maybe don't have that ability or have that freedom to express, what their chosen preference would be one way or the other. So I think that's a fair point, and I think it's a valid point as well. So now then, Karen, what would your 3 pieces of advice be to a parent who's on the journey of being an Angelman's parent?
This is difficult because I'm 59 and it took me all these years to learn this. But if I could really make a strong wish for a parent in your shoes, young, handsome, breathing, life left in you, try very, 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 very hard to learn to accept help and get out, even if it's for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. I know a lot of people are able to do that. I was unable to do that. I was unable to, even when I got out. See, I got out with my sister. My mom was watching Jonathan. I was unable to detach here. I would constantly, we have to stop and call because it was pre-cell phone days. I have to stop and call and see how they're doing. And it's very hard. I don't know how to explain to a parent to do it. But try really hard, even if it's 5 minutes a day, to remember you, who Paul is, who Darren is, who Rita is. She deserves time. He deserves time. You deserve attention from yourself. You don't want to look like me when you're 59. Spend some time on yourself. The second piece of advice I would give is roll with it. I would love to tell people, oh, lighten up, be cheerful. Well, you know what? That's easy for me. It's just my personality. I will joke about things that are inappropriate, and I will continue to do this. I will do it at the dinner table. I don't care. But normal people don't. And so I think roll with it. If you feel like crying, frickin' cry. If you feel like making fun of a situation, laugh at it. It doesn't matter what other people think. You are in your shoes. No one else on the planet is in your exact shoes. You handle it the way you're going to handle it. And don't let anybody else tell you that the way you're doing it or what you're saying or anything you think of it is wrong, because you're right. And you don't have to apologize for being yourself, and you don't need permission to be yourself and handle what this stuff we call Angelman syndrome is your way. You're the only one who can do it your way. You do it your way. Don't apologize, and just be you. Roll with it. It's going to get really hard, and it's going to get really beautiful, and you don't want to miss either one because you were afraid of one or the other. We get afraid, don't we, to enjoy the beautiful moments because it could crash any minute. And we get afraid of crashing. And so we don't really allow ourselves to do that whole mourning process that we should be doing because it's just too friggin' painful. And it's nice. It would be really nice, wouldn't it, if I would say, oh, just find middle ground. And no, I'm not going to say that to anybody. If you're feeling it, feel it. And if other people can't handle it, the hell with them. Sorry, that's not their journey. It's yours. Own your journey. And the day you need a minute's rest from it, take it. Because you're the only one who ever, ever, ever is going to look out for you. You might have a loving spouse. You might have wonderful family and friends. You're really the only one who knows what you need. Get those needs met. My third piece of advice would be, anytime you can laugh at it, laugh at it. Because nothing takes the power away from something quicker and more readily than if you laugh at it. If you can find the humor, you've disarmed the whole army. Let your kids show you what to do. Laugh at it.
I particularly just like, and for me, it's one of those hashtags you would put on Twitter or Facebook, and it was own your journey. And I think it's absolutely, there's nothing more to say. I just think it's spot on, it's succinct, it's clear, and it tells people, what they need to know about it. So I think that's a great second piece of advice. Your third piece of advice.
Thanks. It's not easy what we do, but you know what? It's worth it. It's worth it. Everything we learn helps us in every other branch of our lives, every other part of our lives.
Thinking back, talking to your much younger self, maybe even going back 10 years, would there be anything additional to the 3 pieces of advice that you've already given that you would say to your younger self? Karen?
My pre-Jonathan self?
Sure.
Yeah, to the early Jonathan me, I would give her lots of advice. The first probably being, if you don't drink wine, take the Xanax that the doctor gives you. And the reason I say that is, I have anxiety and panic disorder, and I hate to take my medication, and I hated it way back then. If I had it cooperated, you know, I might have had an easier time of things. The other would have been sleep anytime you get a chance to sleep. I don't care if it's 3 in the afternoon and there's things to do. The house will be dirty every day for the rest of your life, trust me. If you can sleep, sleep. Sleep.
That's
I don't know
great.
what else I can tell her. She had to learn as she went. Uh-oh. Have more time.
I would tell the younger me that I was right, and I am right, because not in like an egotistical way, but in trusting my gut instincts. Just like she was saying, if Johnny didn't like someone, I didn't like them. And if someone didn't approve of Johnny, relationship-wise, like if it was someone I was dating, then they found the door. And my fiance is a wonderful man, and he'll just be like, oh, Johnny escaped out of his room and he's eating something in the bookcase, and before we can get there, he's already taken Johnny back to his bed. He'll just walk by and see he needs his diaper changed. And he just does it. And I always said when I was younger that whoever I was going to be with had to be like that. And I wasn't sure if that was putting such a high standard up. But I knew Johnny was my priority. And I always know with the noises he makes, the expressions he makes, I know when something's wrong. And I never wanted to doubt myself, but there's always that little part that thinks I'm crazy, and I finally lost it and I went off the deep end. But I know that I'm right, deep down. And I would tell myself that I was right to go with those gut feelings, because they've proven to be right probably 98% of the time with Jonathan.
She's right.
Do either of you have any Angelman-related tattoos?
Sorry?
Do either of you have any Angelman-related tattoos?
Oh, a tattoo. Without that blue rose, girl.
I have a blue rose right there.
Even closer.
Next to some funky things. I also have a 3-eyed spider below it, but that's not part of this. Because blue roses don't recur. And so there was a story I read when I was much younger about how blue roses were God's special flowers, and it related that to handicapped kids and disabled kids. And when I read that story, I knew he was my blue rose. So every time I look at my arm and I see that, I think of him, and I think of every reason why I'm fighting for him, for us as a family, to be his guardian soon, finally legally. And he's my boy. I look at my arm every time and I think of it.
Would you be able to dig out that story and provide or a link for that story to both Darren and I? I think that would make a lovely promo for us to do.
I will find that, because it's a beautiful story, and it'll make any man cry.
Yep.
It just takes away their manhood, and they just fall like a baby.
I have my Nakyta tattoo, but I don't have my Jonathan tattoo yet. But next year I will be sporting that new tattoo.
Just great to hear your story, and wonderful to chat with yourself, Karen and Nakyta, this afternoon. And thank you for your this morning, and just say how much it's been a tremendous pleasure to and a great privilege to hear about your journey and to hear you share that as well. And for you both to know that there'll be people who'll be watching this episode of ALifeReal who'll be encouraged and inspired on the journey as much as Paul and I have been in talking with you. So thank you for your time, Paul.
Yes, absolutely. So Karen and Nakyta, again, thank you both very much for being on the show. Have you enjoyed the interview?
Yes. I was terrified, and it was actually quite wonderful and easy, and I doubt we said anything memorable that'll help anyone, but it was lovely. It was wonderful.
Well, I've certainly found it very, very informative, and I know everybody else does as well. I think we're really growing a nice audience here with this project with ALifeReal, which is about sharing these journeys, which is about informing people, and just letting more. I think that the key thing here is just letting people know they're not alone. And it's not all negative. It's a beautiful journey, and just to touch back on your point, it's about touching souls, and that's what we're doing here. All of our souls are connected, and our journeys are all connecting as well, and I think that's fantastic. I'm going to do the promo bit now. Is if you are watching at home and you've enjoyed this interview with Karen and her daughter Nakyta, please hit the subscribe button below, hit the like button, share it with your friends, share it with your family. We are doing stories from the journey. Darren and I are really happy to share these stories. We're happy to share the journey. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with the professionals, get the information out there. This has been a great episode. This has been Darren, Paul, Karen and Nakyta on ALifeReal. Thank you very much.